You would not even imagine what might be hiding right now underground, at the bottom of the seas, in forests, deserts, and even in the most ordinary places that people pass by every single day. In this big episode, the most insane, creepy, and incredible finds from all over the planet, from a mammoth skull found in a trench and a rocket sticking out of the ground, to ancient treasures under the water, submerged settlements, secret underground rooms, giant creatures, abandoned military equipment, and even mysterious objects whose origin is still impossible to explain completely. This is the Top Facts channel, and what you are about to see will really shock you. Spend this time with maximum interest, and I wish everyone a pleasant viewing. At the former Sabo Naval Base, there is a 45-meter-long aircraft nicknamed Mad Dog. From 1990 to 2009, it was a real legend, regularly taking on board 137 passengers. Then, it was decommissioned and given to aviation engineering students for practice. And later, like any legend, Mad Dog was simply forgotten. Floods always leave surprises behind, but nobody expected to see a Cybertruck among them. It looks as if the future has literally been washed ashore. The chance of finding a missile engine from a C-75 anti-aircraft system in a body of water seems negligibly small, but as it turns out, it is never equal to zero. Drivers near the island of Utella, when diving with masks, find not only corals at the bottom. Much more interesting are dozens of cars, music, that were once thrown into this canyon in the hope of getting rid of them forever. But nature decided otherwise and turned the dump into an underwater museum. A group of tourists greatly inspired archaeologists when they found a giant stone hand. But joy quickly turned into disappointment. It turned out to be just a modern sculpture, not the petrified hand of an ancient god. As the United States Navy put it, they did not lose a nuclear submarine. It simply fell asleep. A wording that raises even more questions than it gives answers. The only good thing about the Atlantic Wall is that its ruins are now interesting to search for. This bunker, for example, is one of thousands of fragments of a giant defensive line. A man saw a washed-up rescue capsule on the shore, and of course ran to help. But there was not a soul inside, only a supply of food and things. There are far too many questions and almost no answers. One 400-meter-long dragon sculpture in the mountains would already be impressive. But in the province of Zhejiang, there are 9 of them. They were once part of a large cultural park in China. And now, they stand like a frozen procession of mythical creatures. The Templars can finally rest. Their legacy has officially ended up in the hands of modern followers. Whatever that means, it all looks like someone tried very hard to preserve the atmosphere of an ancient order. When our grandmothers and grandfathers were not even born yet, this bicycle was simply chained to a tree. The years passed, the trunk grew, and now the bicycle has literally grown into it and become part of the forest. The Monanto Quarry in Finland looks like an underwater labyrinth of the Minotaur. Only there are no mythical monsters here. It is so quiet that even the fish do not come here. Once upon a time, limestone was mined here, but in 1976, the groundwater completely flooded the mines. Imagine a 40-year-old train stuck on the top of a mountain, and around it there is not a single piece of track. And I'm asking myself the same question as you are. How did it even get there at all? If aliens do exist, they clearly parked their ship not in the safest place. The object looks so much like something that makes you immediately want to ask, guys, are you sure it was not you who dropped this?
Ходишь по лесу, ни живой души, и встречаешь вот такую штуку круглую.
For car lovers, Desert Valley Auto Parts is a mandatory item on the wish list. There are about 10,000 vintage cars here, frozen in time. A walk through this junkyard is like a teleporter to the previous century.
But unfortunately, if you need glass for one of these, you would probably go to this place.
And peeling and attracts only stalkers. Can stained glass windows survive more than 5 centuries? This find proves that they absolutely can. The colored glass still shines as if it had just been installed. They say that in China's Hubei province, some creature resembling a yeti roams around. Judging by the shape of this crumpled truck, maybe it is not such a fairy tale. If you have nowhere else to live, try asking the universe for help. Maybe it will lead you to an abandoned mobile home park. Judging by the look of it, nobody has been there for a long time. But the homes are still standing and waiting for new stories. There are, of course, no penguins in the Arctic, but there are plenty of other inhabitants. Rocket stages scattered across the ice. Space debris that stubbornly reminds us that everything we launch up, sooner or later, falls down. A footprint 120 centimeters long was found in the rock, and it casts doubt on everything we know about the Earth's past. Maybe humanoid titans really once walked the planet, and they did it more than 200 million years ago. You go into the forest for mushrooms and find a secret German bunker. From the remaining equipment, it is clear that no one has been in here since the war, as if the owners just stepped out for a minute and never came back. On the 2nd of August 2015, fishermen near the town of Anona unexpectedly hit the jackpot. About 50 sea containers with washing machines and household appliances fell off a Taiwanese cargo ship. While the authorities were trying to figure out what to do, the fastest fishermen were already catching and selling almost all of this catch in an ancient Japanese burial mound, about 1,600 years old. They found a sword 2.3 meters long. According to ancient beliefs, it was placed in the grave so that it could protect the deceased from evil spirits even after death. Off the coast of Myanmar, fishermen caught a creature with the body of a fish and a head that looks like a dolphin's head. Some people seriously think that this is a sign of a new era of evolution in the South China Sea. When workers drained the water from the reservoir, they expected to see silt and stones. Instead, they were met by 9 cars from the 1990s. It looks very much like the mafia's attempt to get rid of evidence once and for all. Do not panic because of a 130-meter snake-like skeleton washed up on the shore in France. It is just an art installation. But you have to admit, the sight still gives you goosebumps. This man simply turned the wrong way and ended up in a huge graveyard of military equipment from the time of the Second World War. Rows of rusty vehicles, tanks, and trucks look as if time was frozen with one snap of the fingers. In May 1941, the British loaded the SS Thistlegorm ship to the brim. Ammunition, tanks, motorcycles, everything for North Africa. They were sure the ship would reach its destination. But the Luftwaffe had other plans. After the attack, the ship disappeared from radar, music, and no one saw it again until 1955, when it was rediscovered on the seabed. At a depth of 1,500 meters, divers found more than 900 unique porcelain and ceramic items. For almost 9 centuries, the fish literally ate from these dishes. If you think you are having a lucky day, remember the man who accidentally stumbled upon 2-meter-long crystals. Now that is what I call real good luck. At the end of the 19th century, Bolivia planned to expand its railway network. But, as so often happens, the money ran out, and the brand new locomotives were simply abandoned like unwanted toys. Now this rusty graveyard is a paradise for scrap metal lovers and photographers. A group of tourists returned from Mongolia and claimed that they managed to film the mythical Olgoi Korkoi worm. Whether to believe it or not is up to you, but the find looks so creepy that it gives you goosebumps. This is not at all that ball from a Miley Cyrus music video. This is something much more real, a genuine siege cannonball that centuries ago was used to destroy the walls of a colonial fortress. sun, beach, and 200 coffins. That is exactly the scene that appeared on the Italian coast when a strong current collapsed part of a coastal cemetery straight into the sea. A picture straight out of a nightmare. It seems that nature liked King Kong so much that it carved his stone version 550 meters long in the mountains of the Czech Republic. From above, it really looks like a huge lying ape. I do not even know what is cooler, to find a mermaid underwater, or to stumble upon statues of Buddha that may be more than 2,000 years older than our era. Both options sound like a movie plot. On the 2nd of January 2019, a storm called Kind Santa hit the shores of the Netherlands. It threw an entire container full of televisions and furniture onto the shore. But where the remaining 269 containers ended up is still a mystery. The most amazing thing about this find is not the rocket itself, but its age. It is only a few months old. How it ended up in the middle of the Chinese desert is a question for which there is still no answer. Google Maps led this guy straight to an abandoned airfield, where he found an amazing MiG-23 that had been rusting in the open for years. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Mother Nature turned an ordinary car junkyard into a true art space. Rusty cars entwined with greenery look like an installation from a contemporary art museum. Several years ago, on this very day, dozens of passengers in Malaysia unexpectedly could not use their train tickets. History is silent about what actually happened there, but those people clearly had a very strange day. In front of you, there is a rare, endangered creature, the Humber pig. This lightly armored truck was used by the British Army and the police from the 1950s to the 1990s. A real dinosaur on wheels. These future caterpillar structures were supposed to become the headquarters of a large electronics company, but after its bankruptcy in 2023, they were never completed and were simply demolished. Only photos and a feeling of a missed opportunity remain. This photo could be called "The Gods Gave Catfish an Apartment Building and Are Now Taking It Back." A flooded building with fish swimming in its windows looks both funny and a little scary at the same time. Have you ever seen a whale skeleton? One single rib makes a person look like a tiny insect. It is a scale that cannot be conveyed in words. An ordinary farmer was just digging a trench for a gas pipeline. A day like any other. But instead of a pipe, everything ended with the discovery of a mammoth skull about 15,000 years old. Imagine going out to your country house to dig a little and coming back with a prehistoric monster.
In fact, it's the skull, the jaw, the tusk.
Right in the middle of the desert in China, there is a real pirate ship. Locals say that the crew once went in search of treasure and just disappeared. And the ship still seems to be waiting for them to return and climb aboard. In August 2025, divers in the Ria Quarry found a homemade one-seat submarine. First, they pulled a 150-kilogram hull up from a depth of 5 meters, and then they started looking for the author. It turned out to be Eerie. 15 years earlier, he had been testing his creation, but because of a small mistake, the submarine went to the bottom. Planning to go to the beach in Puerto Rico? Be ready to share the sand with a retired M4 Sherman tank. You have to agree, that is not the most typical neighbor for a sun lounger. On Bali, an airplane parked next to a house does not particularly surprise anyone. One enthusiast bought a damaged airliner and turned it into a restaurant. Now that is what I call an unconventional business plan. A bus lost in the mountains is not that strange by itself. What is strange is that there is a camera hanging above it. Those who dared to go inside claim that there is a hidden door leading to an underground base. For these crystal hunters, the motto is simple. The dirtier the mud, the cleaner the treasures it hides. Judging by their finds, this philosophy works perfectly. No matter how much the German submarine tried to blend in with the seabed, it was still found. It is believed that in 1945, it was sunk by a mine. Now it is yet another reminder of war in the depths. Look at all these amphorae of wine. It looks as if Dionysus himself hid them for later. And it seems that later never came. I really hope that this chest is not a cursed treasure left by pirates. But knowing their reputation, I would still open it very carefully. For more than 40 years, the monument near Yonaguni Island has not given scientists peace. Some are sure it is a natural rock. Others believe it is the ruins of a lost civilization. And the more debates there are, the more it looks like a missing piece of the puzzle in human history. This woman signed up for an ordinary dive tour and definitely did not expect to find an ancient Buddhist temple underwater. There is a version that even deeper there is an entire sunken city hidden. And that thought is really unsettling. This diver spent 3 hours pulling from the seabed something he thought was a treasure chest. He opened it, and it was an ordinary trash bin. That is how life sometimes turns us into clowns. In this cave, there are more handprints than glow sticks at a BTS concert. And the main thing is that they are about 11,000 years old. Imagine how long ago people left their marks here. Literally. This train looks as if it drove straight out of a horror movie. Nobody really knows how it got stuck in the tunnel, but many people swear that they still hear screams coming from the empty carriages. What if humans were not the first intelligent civilization on Earth? The finds in this cave make you wonder whether we will have to rewrite history textbooks. I have never seen anything like this. Someone stumbled upon an abandoned factory for the production of dishes. It is hard to believe that the owners just left because they decided to switch to plastic forks and plates. I have two versions about this mountain bus graveyard. Either the forest spirits needed public transport, or someone was simply too lazy to organize proper disposal. This gun is the reason why during the Second World War, nobody risked approaching the beach called Sand Gat. The sight of such a barrel quickly discouraged any desire to land on the shore. Exploring local waters, a 14-year-old boy named Cameron accidentally crashed his drone into a strange metal cylinder. It turned out to be a 500-kilogram bomb. Fortunately, the bomb disposal experts quickly defused it. What else would you expect to see in a harbor if not a Soviet submarine from the Cold War era? At least this one does not have nuclear missiles. That already makes it easier to breathe. The Naka Cave in Thailand is clearly underestimated. With its distinct scales and twisted forms, it looks like the petrified body of a giant snake. Geologists say it is a natural formation, but they themselves admit that quite possibly, similar creatures really crawled across the Earth 100 million years ago. This gas station's best days are long gone. By the dozen abandoned cars in front of the entrance, it is clear that now it is more of an open-air museum than a place where you fill up your tank. This abandoned water park has such a creepy vibe that it is hard to believe that only 20 years ago, it was one of the main attractions in China. Now, everything is overgrown. I recommend that you carefully inspect the walls in your own house. What if somewhere inside a bundle of rare $2 bills is hidden? Someone definitely came up with such a safe. You have to agree, finding a rocket stage in the forest that sticks out of the ground like a tree is clearly not an everyday sight. Nature and technology have created a very strange duet here. Forget about a sandy bottom. In this body of water, the entire bottom is a pile of sunken cars, as if someone decided to build an underwater parking lot out of them. This sinkhole, the size of a tennis court, music, appeared in Chile 3 years ago. Its perfectly even, smooth walls still baffle geologists. With your moral support, these people will pull the legendary T-34 tank out of the river. It has been waiting for this moment since 1942, lying in mud and water, and now It is finally being brought back to life. No human collection of cars can compare to Poseidon's collection. At the bottom of this body of water, there is a whole cemetery of cars. Do you recognize the make of this one? Write it in the comments. Maybe someone used to. This truck was found in the river more than 20 years ago. And instead of pulling it out for scrap metal, the locals turned it into a symbol of the town. Now it stands as a monument, reminding everyone that sometimes trash becomes a landmark. The investments these treasure hunters made in their diving gear paid off many times over. They found Spanish gold underwater worth about $1 million. That is what I call a hobby that pays for itself. After restoration in 1994, the Pelican 16 aircraft was ready for a new life. But during its first flight to England, 2 engines on the right wing failed at once. The pilot landed the plane in the middle of the Sahara and saved 19 crew members, but the Pelican itself remained in the desert. They were no longer able to take it back. This strangely shaped monument on Cosmos Hill in Serbia consists of 5 concrete blocks. They symbolize the sparks of the struggle of Serbian partisans for freedom. A grim but very powerful symbol. Off the coast of Kamchatka, after a storm, they found a stranded whale 19 meters long. Even such giants cannot always cope with the elements. From 1929 to 1951, a hermit named Bob Stinson lived in this cave. They say he caught lynxes and coyotes with his bare hands and brewed his own potions. A true forest mage of his time. After long decades underwater, the ghost town of Acheredo, which they call the Atlantis of Spain, began to reappear on the surface. It was flooded in 1992 to create the Alto Lindoso Reservoir. Now, due to extreme heat and drought, the streets and houses are once again showing themselves to the world. Right beside the highway near Sacramento, there is a 3-deck paddle steamer. It managed to serve the military and even appeared in several films. Now, all that remains of its glorious past are memories and rust. These creepy shots look as if they were ripped out of a movie about the end of the world. Why do you think the owner abandoned the store? Write your versions in the comments. The story is clearly not that simple. The ghost town of Nelson bears its name for a reason. Locals insist that the spirits of former residents return here every night to keep it from completely falling apart.
This is like the Jeepers Creepers rig. GMC, little generator on the back to do whatever this thing was doing.
For some people, an unusual find is a lost sock in the washing machine. For others, it is a bomber of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Do you feel the difference in the level of luck? The statue of Pindo Matilik on the island of Sulawesi has seen almost all the civilizations of Southeast Asia rise and fall. And at the same time, it still looks as if it had been finished restoring just yesterday. Since we started talking about buildings, on the shore of the San Francisco Bay, they spotted a real version of Howl's Moving Castle. A house that looks as if it is about to tear off its foundations and walk across the waves. Here's a find even scarier than the Flying Dutchman. A mysterious lighter about which absolutely nothing is known. Whose it is, where it came from, why it exists. One big mystery. Have you ever heard of the submarine Questor 1? After the very first attempt to launch it, it was simply left to rust in the Coney Island Creek Channel. And now it looks more like a movie prop than a real vessel. Somewhere in the forest, these guys stumbled upon a structure that looks very much like the elbow joint of Optimus Prime. Although perhaps it is just part of an aircraft engine. To be honest, it is still unclear. And how do you like such a gift from the ocean? The local bomb disposal squad was especially happy about this find. A real live munition was discovered on the seabed. The sea knows how to keep dangerous surprises. If someone tells you that this stone head is older than 500 years, do not believe it. It was made specifically to attract tourists. Marketing works even when it is just a rock. This crystal skull from Tula Hidalgo raises one huge question. How did ancient people know what aliens look like if, in theory, they had never seen them? 80 years ago, this swamp swallowed a German tank whole. Now, before your eyes, it is finally being pulled to the surface. History is literally coming out of the mire. In the Red Canyon, a shiny triangular monolith appeared out of nowhere. As soon as people started talking about it, it disappeared into nowhere. Who put it there? Who took it away? Just one more mystery for the collection. The hunter-gatherer who drew these pictures 3,300 years ago clearly had no idea that they would end up on our channel. But if he had had YouTube and subscribed, he definitely would have known. And you too, do not forget to subscribe. During the Second World War, tanks were often buried up to the turret in the ground and used as stationary firing points. The problem is that not all of them were later dug back up, and now they are resurfacing like ghosts of war. Looking at this 2-meter-long plesiosaur skull, you realize only one thing. It is good that we did not exist 150 million years ago. Meeting such a creature underwater would be a very questionable pleasure. This huge sculpture lay underground in Iraq for 2,700 years. Experts believe that this is Lamassu, an Assyrian goddess protector, the patroness of her people. Sometimes antiquity is not found. It rises on its own when the water level falls. In one Chinese reservoir, a stone head slowly appeared from the surface. The face is calm, motionless, as if it watched from the depths for many decades. Archaeologists confirm this is an image of Buddha, belonging to a historical period. In such cases, the Ming era is often mentioned. But then something even stranger appears. In the rocks nearby, they notice traces of old structures, fragments of a roof, stone elements that could not appear just like that. Scanning shows, under the water, there is not one object. There is an entire complex. Temple structures, remnants of architecture, as if a large corner of history was flooded and preserved. And the question here is not how beautiful. The question is, why did it end up underwater? An element, a flood, a human decision, or an event about which it is more convenient to keep silent than to tell? Sometimes the scariest thing is not the desert and not the sea. The scariest thing is your own home. A person goes down into the basement for tools and notices on the wall a small creature. It is tiny, of a strange shape, looks as if it does not belong to any familiar family of living beings. He records a video and uploads it online. And the classic begins. Some insist this is something unknown, others laugh. A stuck-on toy, third suspect editing. But there is a reason why such clips hook millions. They hit an ancient button in the head. Home must be safe, and if something chujoi appears on your wall, you immediately understand how thin that illusion is. A group of researchers of marine life finds on the bottom an object that would make any medieval reenactor dizzy. A helmet. Only one nuance. It is not big. It is such that a person can really swim inside it, like into a small room. They film footage, show it to a familiar archaeologist, and he allegedly says, "This is not a decorative thing. This looks like equipment of a creature of enormous height." Yes, it sounds like a legend. But such stories hold not on evidence, but on the feeling of scale. If the object really was meant to be worn, who then wore it? In Egypt, there are places where you can walk on stone and feel that under your feet, there is not just emptiness, but someone's carefully closed history. A group of researchers makes its way into a cave near the Sinai Desert and stumbles upon a passage that looks too clean for a random crack. And then, a room. Not a storeroom, not a niche. A room. Sarcophagi, objects, wall paintings. And the most dangerous word for rumors, gold. According to eyewitness accounts, almost everything inside was made of pure gold, as if someone decided not to hide wealth, but to seal an entire era. Then, The authorities and archaeologists get involved, and in the public field, a version sounds that the find belongs to a period associated with Cleopatra. In such stories, Cleopatra III is often mentioned. And here the classic begins. The story seems loud, but information, a drop. As if someone turned on the light for a second and immediately turned it off again. And there remains the feeling that we know about the past exactly as much as we are allowed to know. Imagine dark water, where a flashlight beam is the only reality. A diver slowly glides along the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, and suddenly the light snatches from the sand. A hand, not a stone, not a snag. Fingers, joints, a shape that is too easy to read as human. And the size, such that in a normal person, an ancient instinct switches on inside. This is not mine. I am out of place here. According to the eyewitness, on the wrist, a massive hoop gleamed, like a golden bracelet or a cuff ring, with symbols that no one could confidently decipher. He filmed it on video, and, they say, left from there, almost in panic. The real movie begins later. When he returns not alone, the find disappears. Only a trace remains in the sand, as if something heavy really lay there for a long time. The official version sounds expected, a feature of the relief, a rock formation. But there is one problem, the video. And if the footage is real, then the question is no longer, what is it? But why was it removed so quickly? On the outskirts of Egypt, friends explored a hidden cave and saw a bundle in white cloth. Usually such finds end in trash or old clothes, but not this time. They unfold the cloth and freeze. Inside, a creature with an elongated face and a rib cage where the ribs look frighteningly open, as if the body did not die naturally but was prepared. The strangest detail is the jewelry. Bony hands are covered with golden spiral bracelets like snakes, and on the neck, a serpent necklace with turquoise inserts and one bright blue stone. Such a composition looks not like an accident, but like a ritual. The remains were taken for tests, and then again, silence. In these stories, what is frightening is not the monster, but the empty space where there should be a report. When not things disappear, answers disappear. The 23rd of September, 2021. If you believe the story, archaeologists discovered a hidden tomb in a cave system near Luxor. They go inside and see something that turns off a normal person's voice. Perfectly preserved mummies inside sealed sarcophagi. Not remains, not fragments. Whole bodies, lying so calmly as if they were placed yesterday. And there, a passage into a tunnel below, into an underground space, where there are even more artifacts and sarcophagi, as if this is not a single tomb, but a node of a huge network. The mummies are carefully carried out, the entrance is closed, and some of the sarcophagi, as claimed, end up in a museum. But the main question remains, who are these people? Why were they sealed so carefully? And how many such quiet rooms are still hidden under the sand, simply waiting until someone makes a wrong step with a shovel? Archaeologists in Peru discovered on a slope a huge drawing of a cat made of stones. From the ground, it seems like a set of lines, but from above, it is as if a second layer of reality switches on. The animal appears whole, and you understand the scale. And then the familiar internet echo appears. Who could make this without drones? How did they see it as a whole? Maybe this is a sign for someone from above? The official side usually stays with the ground. Ancient cultures knew how to work with relief and perspective. But even with the most rational explanation, magic remains. People of the past left images as if they knew. One day someone would look at them from the sky. Recently, archaeologists announced the discovery of an ancient city in the northern part of Peru, in the Barranca province. Its age is estimated at about 3,500 years, and the name in reports sounds like Peñico. This city, according to researchers, could have been a key trading hub, connecting coastal communities with the Andes and even with directions toward the Amazon. And here is what is surprising. While we are used to thinking that civilizations are Egypt, Mesopotamia, Asia, a couple of famous points. And here, another center, another network, another world that lived in parallel. Such discoveries seem to expand the map of humanity and remind history is not linear. It is like a forest, with a lot of paths we have not yet walked. At a construction site in the area of Golyama Kosmatka, not far from Shipka in Bulgaria, workers hit something hard with a shovel. And at first they thought, a stone. But it was an object hidden in the ground, covered with dust and time. Archaeologists clean the find, and from the dirt, a bronze face emerges. Not an abstract mask, but features that seem to look back. Experts connect this with a ruler of the Thracian world. In such stories, a name like Sotes appears, and it is exactly here that a cold detail appears. Such things often lie not as lost, but as placed. The thing seemed to be waiting until someone brought it back into the light. And every time a face appears from the earth, you involuntarily think, how many faces we will never see? Because they will remain there forever. 2 people in Jerusalem were digging up a tree. A normal story until under the roots, there's found a strange cavity and an object like a heavy box. On the lid, carving, not a little pattern for beauty, but signs that make you uncomfortable, as if it is a warning, not a decoration. They take out the box, and inside, as claimed, they find stone tablets with writings that cannot be confidently read right away. Then, the loudest statement. Allegedly, this could be that very sacred repository, which is linked with ancient legends about the tablets of the law. And according to rumors, the find is quickly handed over to where it needs to go. If this is fake, why so many details, and why does everything go quiet so abruptly? A group of friends was playing on the beach. Something sticks out of the sand that looks like a snag, or like part of something larger. They start digging, and a huge crocodile's body is revealed. Not just big, almost on the border of fantasy. About 20 feet. Yes, large crocodiles exist. But the strange thing here is something else. The preservation. As if nature did not eat it, time did not destroy it. As if it was hidden. Specialists arrive, take everything away for research. And then, silence. No detailed reports, no official publications. Neither this is a rare specimen, nor this is a measurement error, nor here are photos and analysis. When not a body disappears, but information, it always raises questions. Because nature usually does not hide traces so neatly. People do that. And here's a rare case when mysticism is replaced by a real miracle of science. In Nineveh, on the territory of modern Iraq, they find clay tablets with cuneiform, symbols like wedges and scratches. To an unprepared eye, it looks like a pattern, but it is writing. Hundreds, thousands of years ago, people recorded like this deals, wars, marriages, laws, disputes, life. Scientists long deciphered these signs, compared languages, built keys, and at some point the text begins to speak. It is almost like time travel. You read not a retelling, but the direct speech of a civilization that long ago turned to dust. And after that, the phrase, "the ancients were primitive," sounds especially funny. They simply lived in another world and wrote it down so that one day we could look there. In 2023, a video went viral on TikTok. A tourist explores a cave in Thailand and supposedly finds a gigantic body lying on the ground. Filming, fear, comments, millions of views. Everything needed for a viral hit. Then, statements by paleontologists arise, versions about Nephilim, biblical giants and ancient beings. And the most telling thing? The place quickly turns into a point of attraction for tourists. as if the video itself was not a find, but bait. Such stories must always be kept at a distance. The internet knows how to draw reality so that you believe because you want to believe. But even if it is fake, it shows something else. People terribly like the thought that under the earth lies not only history, but also something forbidden. In Egypt, archaeologists found a mummy about 2,000 years old. But attention was drawn not by the burial and not by the jewelry, but the tongue. It was made of gold. The specialist's version sounds almost logical. Allegedly, embalmers could give a person a golden tongue so that he could speak in the afterlife, address Osiris, or pass the posthumous judgment. But there is another side that makes you go cold. Why exactly gold? Is it an honor or fear? As if in real life this person spoke too much, and in death they left him a symbolic tongue that will not tell the truth to anyone. A recent story from the series, it sounds incredible, but there are too many details. Inside an ancient pyramid, scientists find massive slabs, perfectly built into the walls of a room. At first glance, just stone. But when they direct light at a certain angle, the slabs begin to glow. They are described as calcite crystals. And then, the strangest thing. With the exact direction of the beam, invisible patterns appear, as if a drawing is hidden in the structure. In the frame or description, a human figure appears, and even a detail like a navel. And the main thing is emphasized. There are no tool marks, no scratches, no chips, no handwriting of manual work. From here, the favorite version of conspiracy theory is born, an energy device, an ancient technology. But even without mysticism, the question remains harsh. How to create perfectly fitted crystals and hidden drawings so as to leave no familiar traces of processing. This story is already from the category of real archaeological sensations. In a cave near the Dead Sea, they found ancient swords, whose age is estimated at about 1,900 years. The most surprising thing is the preservation. Wooden and leather elements, scabbards, handles, as if time spared them intentionally. There is a version that the weapons were hidden by rebels or people hiding from the Romans, and it was the dry climate that helped the swords survive. When you keep in your head the number almost 2,000 years, it becomes strange. This is not just iron. This is an object that was next to those who lived, feared, and fought, and now suddenly ended up in our time. – 2011. A group of engineers or technicians works underwater, repair, cable, a normal task. And suddenly on the bottom, they see an object of a disc-like shape, partially covered by sand. They swim closer and notice something that knocks the brain out of balance. Inside, there seem to be places like seats, but there are no windows, no doors, no markings, no familiar details of technology. It does not look like a submarine, nor a capsule, nor a part of a ship. And here a split arises, like from a textbook. Some shout, UFO. Others say, junk from the bottom. Third keeps silent, because silence is the most convenient position. But the main question is not in the name. The main question is, why do such stories almost always end the same way, without continuation? Sometimes myths become dangerous when they fall into the hands of workers. In a quarry where metal and stone sound like the same routine, a tool suddenly hits not rock. The sound is different, dull, alive. They pull an object out of the ground that looks like a ring, thick, heavy, too large for a human hand to wear. Not a museum ornament, but a thing that looks like it was worn, and worn long ago. Along the edge, signs. Not just an ornament, but a repeating language, as if someone left a mark of ownership. And then another detail appears in the story. Years later, they find a finger bone of enormous size, and on it, patterns suspiciously similar to the symbols on the ring, as if the inscription matched the signature. Someone immediately recalls giants from ancient legends. Someone says, it's a fake. But in any case, something else is strange. Why do such finds always have two endings? Either they hid everything, or nothing was proven. Somewhere in the Caucasus, archaeologists lift a skull out of the ground, and in the first seconds, they do not even understand how to hold it. The shape is unusual, elongated proportions, huge eye sockets, and most importantly, protrusions on the upper part, like horns or bony bumps. It looks as if someone mixed a human and something else, and left the result in the earth. The skull does not fit either standard versions or ordinary deviations. They scan it, compare it, run it through databases, and the answer does not appear. The internet and documentaries especially love such stories. Here it is easy to say, an unknown species, not of earthly origin, traces of ancient beings. But in reality, the scariest thing is not aliens. The scariest thing is the emptiness in the explanation. When smart people honestly spread their hands, it means the find ended up where familiar knowledge ends. A group of people wandered among stone massifs and stumbled upon a strange niche, like a tomb, hidden not for archaeologists, but from archaeologists. What they filmed looks like a frame from a movie. Inside a transparent box lies a person, too whole, too alive in appearance. Not a mummy, not bones. Face, hands, posture. Everything is preserved so well that the brain automatically expects, now he will breathe in. Online, this was quickly linked to the legendary king and hero of ancient texts, Gilgamesh, who is called both a ruler and a semi-divine figure. And here, the most dangerous part begins. Some are sure. This is the sensation of the century, others say. Shot for views, and others are sure it is someone staging against the background of an ancient theme. And here's what is truly frightening. Even if it is a mystification, why is it made so convincingly? And why, after such videos, does there usually remain neither a place nor coordinates, nor a continuation? Only the feeling that you saw something extra. A story from the series, and then everything suddenly disappeared. In one of the ancient regions of Tanzania, archaeologists allegedly find massive bones. So large that at first, they take them for animals. Then, they notice proportions. Too human. And if it is true, then it breaks the usual picture of the past. Who could be so tall? Could the ancient legends about giants be not just a metaphor? According to accounts, the place is quickly closed. Details stop appearing in the news, and everything goes into the fog. When information disappears, rumors grow wings. And when rumors have bones, wings become dangerous. And now, a case that does not need possible and allegedly. 1974, China. Peasants dig a well and stumble upon ceramic fragments and the head of a warrior. And it turns out to be only the door handle to a huge room. Excavations lead to one of the most massive discoveries. Thousands of statues of warriors and horses. An entire army, created more than 2,000 years ago to guard the first emperor in the afterlife. The most frightening thing is not the quantity, but the idea. A man did not have enough power in life. He needed an army after death. And when you see this, you understand. The darkness of history is not always mystical. Sometimes it is quite human, cold, calculating, and very expensive. The 18th of March, 2021, archaeologists were working at a site in the area of Qumran, Israel, when they found a fragment of an ancient parchment. In appearance, an unremarkable piece that is easy to mistake for trash. But dating and expertise indicate something else. This is part of biblical scrolls, associated with the collection of the so-called Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is where the real shiver of time is felt. These texts were created about 2,000 years ago. They survived empires, fires, wars, changes of languages and religions. Their value is not only religious. This is a direct window into an era when texts and meanings were being formed that then influenced half the world. The strongest thing in such finds is a simple thought. The words on the parchment were alive when people walked the earth whose names have long disappeared. And now this paper, like a scar, reminds, history is not a legend. It is a document. In 2022, a drought in Turkey lowered the water level so much that on the banks of the Euphrates walls and corridors of an ancient fortification appeared. What had been hidden for centuries suddenly became accessible to tourists, as if nature itself decided to arrange an archaeological sensation. Galleries, narrow passages, rooms, tunnels, and most importantly, the feeling that this place was designed for defense and isolation. Locals argue, was it a castle, a temple, a church, part of an unknown kingdom? And archaeologists, as usual, try to assemble history from fragments, because stone has no written explanations. But the most disturbing moment is something else. If water can hide entire complexes, it means that even more is hidden under the surface. And we will see it only when the climate or the element again opens the curtain. A person lives in an old house, imagine about 500 years of history in the walls. And one day, while tidying up in the library, he notices something strange. Behind the bookshelves, there is a hole. Not a crack, not a crevice. An entrance. He opens this place and discovers a passage into a tunnel, which leads into 2 rooms. There are abandoned things, an old boiler, a locker cabinet. Then, he calls a friend. They try to open the locker, fuss, get nervous, carry it outside, and finally open it. And what is inside? Not gold, not weapons, but the quietest treasure, paper. A guide to the house and a letter from 1837 from a man with a high title. In the legend, a name like Spencer Compton, Duke of Devonshire, appears, where he writes about health, a trip, land, and mentions this house. This is the case when it is creepy not from monsters, but from the thought. A house can have hiding places you do not know about, and those hiding places have owners, even if they died long ago. In central Thailand, the Nong Bua temple for about 20 years was considered lost. It was flooded by the waters of a dam, and people resigned themselves. That's it, it is no longer there. But a severe drought comes, one of the most severe in decades. The water level falls, and the temple begins to show through the mud. Walls, columns, fragments of the courtyard. Crowds arrive, someone photographs, someone prays, someone perceives it as a sign. But at the same time, local farmers suffer. Fields dry out. The harvest dies. There is not enough water. And here, there is a powerful, dramatic contrast. The past returns when the present collapses. The temple seems to remind people, history does not disappear. It simply waits until you have no time to think about it. The 10th of September, 2018, in the Czech Republic, a stone with an inscription appeared from a shallowed river that is impossible to read calmly. When you see me, weep. Such stones are called hunger stones. They appeared in periods of drought and low water and served as a signal of trouble. According to specialists' version, the inscription was left by a man named Fran Meyer before a devastating flood a century ago, as a warning to descendants. The stone again ended up on the surface, and experts noted that the water level became lower than historical benchmarks. In such stories, mysticism is not needed. The awareness that nature keeps memory better than any archives is enough, and sometimes shows it to us as a threat. A diver in the Mediterranean Sea notices an object that looks like a sword, all in shells, rust, and growths, as if the sea special node dressed it in armor. He pulls out the find and at first does not understand what he's holding. The metal is Resrussian, the shape is unclear. But after cleaning, details and signs appear, which in the legend of the story, link the sword with a historical figure, even with a name on the level of Frederick Barbarossa. It sounds loud and controversial, yes, but the scene itself is strong. You pull out of the water a weapon that could have been next to a man who disappeared in the chaos of war or an ambush. And here, a simple rule works. The fewer exact answers we have, the stronger fantasy draws in blood and fate. This man simply turned the wrong way and stumbled upon an entire cemetery of Second World War military equipment. Rusty vehicles, guns, parts, among which you can feel the heavy breath of history. A scene like something from a documentary, only without a host. You are the witness yourself. At the former naval base in Saba, there stands a 45-meter airplane, nicknamed Mad Dog. From 1990 to 2009, this airliner lived up to its name, regularly carrying 137 passengers per flight. After it was retired, it was handed over to aviation maintenance students to train on a real machine, not on pictures. But time passes and even legends get forgotten. Now Mad Dog is simply rusting, like a hero people stopped remembering. The monument near Yonaguni Island has been giving scientists no peace for more than 40 years. Some claim it's just a natural rock formation. Others are sure. In front of them are the remains of an ancient, sunken civilization. Which side are you on? The probability of finding a rocket engine from an S-75 anti-aircraft system in a reservoir seems almost zero. But, as practice shows, almost zero is not zero. And here it is, lying on the bottom like a rusty hello from the era of the rocket race. Floods always leave surprises behind, but nobody expected to see a Cybertruck among them. A vehicle that looks as if it was forgotten on a sci-fi film set suddenly ended up on the list of the disaster's aftermath. Divers near the island of Utila Davno understood. It's worth looking not only at the corals. On the bottom here lies something far more interesting. Dozens of cars. Once they were simply dumped into this canyon, hoping the sea would hide all traces. But nature decided otherwise and turned the dump into an underwater museum. After many years underwater, the ghost town of Aceredo, which was nicknamed the Spanish Atlantis, began to come to the surface. It was flooded in 1992 to create the Alto Lindoso Reservoir. And now, because of the extreme heat and drought of recent years, streets, houses, and walls are showing themselves to the world again. From 1929 to 1951, this cave was home to a hermit named Bob Stinson. People say he caught lynxes and coyotes with his bare hands, and also brewed his own tinctures. A life like a mix of a western and a fairy tale about an old forest man. Right by the highway in Sacramento stands a 3-story paddle steamer. Once it served the military, then it managed to appear in several films. Now all that remains of its former glory are memories and a dulled hull pressed into the shore. A group of tourists returned from Mongolia and claimed they managed to film the legendary Olgoi Korkoi worm. A real creature or an impressive legend, you decide. But the footage itself looks strange enough to leave an aftertaste. At the end of the 19th century, Bolivia planned to expand the railway network. But, as often happens, the money ran out before the dreams did. Brand new locomotives were simply abandoned in the middle of the desert, like unwanted toys. Now this rusty train graveyard is a nightmare for an engineer, but paradise for those who hunt for scrap metal. This is not a ball from a Miley Cyrus clip, but something far more serious. Many centuries ago, this battering ram was used to break through the walls of a colonial fortress. That's a truly destructive projectile. It looks like nature was so inspired by King Kong that it carved an entire monument in the mountains of the Czech Republic about 550 meters long. The rocks form an outline very similar to a giant figure. So sometimes mountains watch movies too, and remember them. Sun, sea, beach, and 200 coffins. That was the nightmarish picture on an Italian coast when a strong current collapsed part of a coastal cemetery straight into the sea. Old graves simply slid down and coffins were carried to the shore. I don't even know what's more impressive: finding a mermaid statue underwater or stumbling upon Buddhist figures that people may have prayed to even before our era. Imagine, you're swimming with scuba gear, and around you are ancient deities standing on the bottom as if on their own pedestals. By itself, a 400-meter dragon in the mountains would impress anyone. But in Jiangxi province, there are 9 such dragon sculptures. They were part of a large cultural heritage park in China and still look as if they are about to come alive. This man saw a Spacetalne capsule washed up on the shore, and of course, ran to check whether someone needed help. But inside, it was empty, only supplies and equipment. Where the people went and how it all ended is unknown. The Templars can finally sleep spokojno. Their legacy has officially passed into the hands of modern continuers of the cause. Judging by the find, someone takes the idea of nightly traditions in our days very seriously. In August 2025, divers in the Ria Quarry found a homemade one-seat submarine. First, they pulled the craft itself from a depth of 5 meters, weighing about 150 kilograms, and then they began searching for its creator. It turned out to be Eerie. 15 years ago, he tested his creation, but a small Oshipka in the calculations sent the submarine straight to the bottom, and Eerie had to urgently surface alone. Our grandmothers and grandfathers weren't even born yet when this bicycle was chained to a tree and forgotten. Over the decades, the trunk literally grew into the frame. Now it's not just transport, but part of the forest. If you ever decide to go to the beach in Puerto Rico, keep in mind, you'll have to share the sand with a retired M4 Sherman tank. Once it was a formidable Bowie machine, and now it has basically become strange beach decor. A bus lost in the mountains is not such a rare thing. But here, there's a nuance. A camera is watching it. Those who dare to go inside say there is a hidden door leading to an underground base. Sounds like an urban legend, but that doesn't make it any less thrilling. In Bali, nobody is surprised anymore by an airplane next to a house. One enthusiast bought a damaged airliner, hauled it onto his plot, and turned it into a restaurant. In the end, these people have a simple motto: the dirtier the dirt, the cleaner the treasures hidden inside it. They literally live in clay and earth to dobovit crystals that later amaze collectors and jewelers. Look at these old bottles and amphorae. It feels like Dionysus himself hid his supplies here. Wine left behind centuries ago turned into a fragment of history sealed in glass. No matter how hard the German submarine U-1021 tried to blend in with the seabed, it was still found. It is believed a mine sent it to the bottom in 1945. Now it is another silent chronicle of war at depth. A group of tourists returned and showed footage of a huge stone hand. Archaeologists, of course, immediately got excited. What if it's the trace of an ancient god? But in the end, it turned out, in front of them was just a sculpture. Beautiful, powerful, but not an artifact from another era. On the 2nd of January, 2019, a real Santa storm broke out on the coast of the Netherlands. A whole container with televisions and furniture washed ashore. But where the other 269 containers ended up is still a mystery. As the US Navy put it, they didn't lose a nuclear submarine. It simply went into hibernation mode. A pretty way to say the boat disappeared and looking for it is pointless. But it sounds, admitted, much calmer. Number 9. For some, an unusual find is finally locating a lost sock. But for others, a random surprise is a Royal Canadian Air Force bomber. There's only one question. How can you even lose something like that? Since we're talking about buildings, one day on the shore of San Francisco Bay, people noticed a house suspiciously similar to a real-life version of Howl's Moving Castle. Strange architecture, a complex structure, as if someone decided to bring anime to life. The Pindo-Maphilic statue on Sulawesi Island survived the rise and fall of almost all civilizations of Southeast Asia. And at the same time, it still looks as if it was installed recently. Stone remembers everything, but it ages very beautifully. In front of you is a find that is truly no less eerie than the legendary Flying Dutchman, a mysterious liner about which nothing is known, absolutely nothing. No exact origin, no story, only a silent hull that raises hundreds of questions. Somewhere in the middle of a forest, guys stumbled upon an iron structure that looks either like Optimus Prime's elbow or part of a jet engine. It's still not fully clear what it is. A fragment of an aircraft or a part from some other mechanical giant. Have you ever heard of the submarine Questor 1? It had only one attempt, the first launch. It failed, the project was abandoned, and the boat stayed rusting in the Coney Island Creek Bay like a monument to unfulfilled ambitions. Imagine a 40-year-old train that is standing on the top of a mountain, and around it, not a single rail. How did it get there? This question torments everyone who sees it for the first time, and there is still no answer. The Monantu mine in Finland resembles Minotaur's underwater labyrinth. Only no mythical monsters. Here it's so quiet that even fish don't swim in. They used to mine limestone here, but in 1976, groundwater completely flooded the mine, turning it into a sunken world. If aliens do exist, it seems they parked their ship in a very questionable place. The strange object looks as if someone set it down for a minute and forgot it for several decades. For car lovers, Desert Valley Auto Parts is a place you absolutely must see. 10,000 vintage cars, as if frozen in time, take you into the past without a time machine. Every body is a separate story. You have to admit, seeing a rocket stage that grows in the middle of a forest is not the picture we're used to, but it exists. Rusty, leaning, like a giant metallic mushroom among the trees. Tip of the day: check all the walls in your house. What if somewhere there's a stash with rare $2 bills hidden there? For those who stumbled upon such a cache, it was definitely the best day of the year. An ordinary farmer was digging a trench for a gas pipeline and was thinking at most about the utility bill, not about history. But it all ended with him stumbling upon a mammoth skull that is about 15,000 years old. Imagine, you go out into your garden and there, no potatoes, but a prehistoric giant. When a snake skeleton, 130 meters long, washed up on the shore of France, people got seriously scared. Panic, rumors, legends. Later it turned out it was just an art installation. But admit it, the sight is still impressive and a little creepy. In May of 1941, the British loaded the ship SS Thistlegorm to the brim, ammunition, tanks, motorcycles. Everything was calculated so the ship would safely reach North Africa. But the German Air Force had other plans. The ship vanished and gave no sign of life anymore, until 1955, when it was finally discovered again. Nummerines. You go into the forest for mushrooms, and you find a secret German bunker. From the equipment left behind, it's clear nobody has been here since the war. Everything feels preserved in the past, as if people left yesterday and never came back. In an ancient Japanese burial mound, they found a sword about 2 meters 30 centimeters long. The blade is around 1,600 years old. According to ancient beliefs, such swords were placed in a grave so they would protect the deceased from evil spirits. Turns out, even after death, warriors were supposed to have their own security. When workers drained one reservoir, a very strange parking lot was waiting for them. On the bottom lay 9 cars from the 90s. It looks like a silent witness to how the mafia tried to get rid of evidence and cars that were better off never being seen. Off the coast of Myanmar, they caught a creature with the body of a fish and a head that looks like a dolphin's. Some are sure it could be a sign of a new stage of evolution of marine animals in the South China Sea. Scary or exciting? You decide. At a depth of about 1,500 meters, divers discovered more than 900 unique porcelain and ceramic items. Imagine, fish have been eating off these plates for almost 9 centuries, without even realizing how museum level they are. Forget a sandy bottom. In one body of water, it's replaced by a whole pile of sunken cars. The vehicles lie in layers, like toys someone tossed into a giant bathtub and walked away. With your moral support, these men pull the legendary T-34 tank out of the river. It has been underwater since 1942, as if it was waiting for this moment, the moment when it would see the light again. This hole the size of a tennis court appeared in Chile 3 years ago. Absolutely even, smooth edges leave geologists puzzled. Nature, a human factor, or something else? The question is still open. No human collection of cars can compare to Poseidon's motor pool. On the bottom here, automobiles stand as if they were intentionally parked for an underwater museum. Do you recognize the brand of this car? Write it in the comments. Let's test your automotive intuition. These treasure seekers clearly didn't invest in diving gear for nothing. Underwater, they stumbled upon a stash worth about $1 million, Spanish gold. Not a coin, not a chain, but a real historical jackpot. This truck was found in a river more than 20 years ago. And you know what the locals did? Instead of pulling it out and scrapping it for metal, they turned it into a symbol of the city. Sometimes a rusty body tells the past better than any monument. After restoration in 1994, Pelican 16 got a chance at a second life, but everything went off plan. During the flight to England, 2 engines on the right wing failed. The pilot made an emergency landing in the middle of the Sahara and saved 19 crew members. The Pelican itself could no longer be saved. It remained in the desert, like a huge metallic skeleton. After a storm off the coast of Kamchatka, a whale 19 meters long ended up washed onto the sand. Even such giants sometimes can't withstand the elements. The scene is powerful and sad at the same time. Nature shows its strength without extra words. This unusual monument on Space Hill in Serbia consists of 5 concrete blocks. They symbolize the flashes of the struggle of Serbian partisans for freedom. It looks like it fell from orbit, but in fact, it is an earthly reminder of the price of independence. If it seems to you that you're lucky, remember the person who accidentally ended up in front of 2-meter crystals. Finds like that look as if they were drawn for a fantasy movie, not grown deep inside the earth. The ghost town of Nelson is called that not just for beauty. Locals insist the spirits of former residents return at night to protect it from final destruction. Believe it or not, the place really looks as if it lives its own, slightly otherworldly life. These shots look like a scene from a movie about the end of the world. An empty shop, abandoned viché, dead silence. What do you think? Why did the owner abandon all of this? Write your version. There's huge room for imagination here. Google Maps once led a guy straight to an abandoned airfield. There, he stumbled upon a stunningly beautiful MiG-23, which had been rusting alone for years. The map may not have known what it was showing, but the result is like a gift for an aviation fan. The most amazing thing about this find isn't even the rocket itself, but its age. It's only a few months old. How did it end up in the Chinese desert? Who parked it there, and why? There are more questions than answers for now. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, nature together with time turned an ordinary landfill into a full-fledged art installation. Overgrowing trees, rust, trash, and suddenly all of it starts to look like an exhibition of modern art. Incredible, but true. In front of you is a rare endangered species of machinery, Humber pig, a light armored truck that the British Army and police used from the 50s to the 90s. Now it looks as if it could be filmed in a series about old conflicts and street riots. A few years ago, on this very day, dozens of passengers in Malaysia suddenly discovered that their railway tickets were no longer valid. Trains, stations, schedules, everything exists. But using the paid trip, impossible. It feels as if the system itself decided to go on vacation. These strange futuristic buildings, Pohoji and Agusanits, were supposed to become the headquarters of a major electronics company. But the firm went bankrupt, the projects were frozen, and the structures were demolished in 2023. Only photographs and sajleni about an unrealized architectural fantasy remain. When you find a whale skeleton, what especially impresses is the scale. A single rib bone makes a human next to it look like a tiny insect. You immediately realize how modest our size is compared to the inhabitants of the ocean. This photograph seems to be signed by nature itself. The gods gave the catfish a high rise, and now they're taking it back. A building going underwater, and fish settling into it like residents. An extremely clear illustration of how the ocean takes back everything humanity once built. This woman signed up for an ordinary dive tour and definitely didn't expect to see an ancient Buddhist temple on the bottom. There is a chance that somewhere deeper an entire sunken city is hidden. Water keeps secrets well, especially secrets like that. If someone tries to convince you that this stone head is older than 500 years, don't believe it. It was made special for tourists. It looks impressive, but it has nothing to do with real antiquity. One diver spent 3 hours pulling from the bottom what he thought was a treasure chest. But instead of gold and dragocenosti, he found a trash bin. Sometimes reality likes to joke in a truly harsh way. And this kind of ocean surprise especially pleased the local bomb disposal unit. Ammunition washed ashore, and instead of Addich, they got an unscheduled work shift. In this cave, there are more handprints than glow sticks at a BTS concert. And the main thing is, they are about 11,000 years old. We look at these traces like drawings, but once they were someone's real palms, left on the wall for a purpose we don't know. And here's what's interesting. The finds in this cave make you think, what if humans were not the first intelligent beings on Earth? Perhaps part of our history is much deeper than we are used to believing. And yes, in that case, history textbooks would have to be rewritten. This train looks as if it stepped off a horror movie poster. Nobody knows for sure how it got stuck in the tunnel, but locals insist. At night, screams can be heard from there. Empty cars, darkness, and echo. Perfect scenery for a scary story. It feels as if someone just took and simply sealed an entire world of plates and cups. Those who found this abandoned factory still udavляются. How could you just leave like that, abandoning equipment, molds, and products? Was it really only about switching to plastic dishes? This cannon is the reason why, during the Second World War, nobody wanted to mess with a certain stretch of coastline. It covered the approach to a place with a name that made you uneasy. I have two versions about this mountain parking lot of buses. The first, forest spirits needed public transport. The second, someone was simply too lazy to dispose of the equipment properly. The buses stand, rust, and look like a surreal open-air exhibition. A 14-year-old boy named Cameron launched a drone over the water, snagged some cylinder, and then realized it was a 500-kilogram bomb. Fortunately, it was quickly obezvredili, but it's clearly not the kind of sluchy you want to repeat. Naka Cave in Thailand deserves much more attention. Its vaults covered with something like stone scales, and the curved forms look as if in front of you is the petrified body of a giant snake. Geologists assure it's a natural formation, but they themselves admit similar creatures of Polnay could have crawled across Earth 100 million years ago. And what else could you find in a harbor, if not a Soviet submarine from the Cold War era? At least this one doesn't have nuclear missiles, and thank goodness for that. Now it's more of a museum exhibit than a military tool. This gas station has clearly lived through better times. Judging by the dozen abandoned cars in front of the entrance, it now looks more like an open-air museum than a working station, an ideal place for filming a survival movie. A story with a question. Can stained glass survive more than 500 years? It can. This find is living proof. Glass made by the hands of masters from long-gone eras still plays with light as if it were installed yesterday. This water park now looks so creepy that it's hard to believe. Just 20 years ago, it was one of the most popular resorts in China. Empty slides, dried up pools, destroyed decorations, everything creates the atmosphere of a dream you'd better not fall into alone. According to rumors, in Hubei province in China, something that looks like a yeti roams around. And looking at the shape of this crumpled truck, you start thinking, what if the legends aren't so far from the truth? This crystal skull from Tula, Hidalgo State, raises one main question. How could the ancient people even know what aliens look like if they never saw them? Or did they see them after all? Here, everyone decides for themselves. If you have nowhere to live, you can Slavno ask the universe for help. Maybe it will lead you to an abandoned parking lot of residential trailers. To some, they look like trash, and to others, a chance to start over, even if in an old house on wheels. About 80 years ago, this swamp swallowed a German assault tank whole. Now, right before your eyes, they are pulling it back out. The machine comes out of the mud like a duck from the past, reminding you that war never disappears without a trace. The hunter-gatherer, who made these drawings 3,300 years ago, clearly didn't suspect his works would end up on our channel. He couldn't subscribe back then. There was no internet. But you can, and you definitely won't miss anything. In Red Canyon, out of nowhere, a shiny triangular prism appeared. People started photographing it, discussing it, building theories, and soon it vanished just as suddenly. As if someone placed it, checked the reaction, and took it back. During the Second World War, tanks were sometimes buried up to the turret, turning them into stationary firing points. But far from all of these improvised bunkers, were later dug out. Some still stick out of the ground, like frozen defenders. This huge sculpture lay underground in Iraq for about 2,700 years. Now specialists believe it depicts Lamassu, an Assyrian Zashitnitsa goddess who protected her people. And even under a layer of soil, it seems, she kept doing that. When you see a plesiosaur skull 2 meters long, you can't help being glad you didn't live 150 million years ago. With neighbors like that, swimming in the sea would have been a little unsettling. The only plus of the Atlantic Wall, fortifications that were built during the war, is that their remains can now be found and explored. Here, for example, is this bunker, once an element of defense, and now a magnet for history lovers. One explorer discovered a burned-out house from the 1950s and 1960s that before the fire had been a perfect time capsule. Despite destroyed upper floors and peeling wallpaper, classic cars survived inside. A genuine 1960s Beetle and an old Morris. The house is ruined, but the cars remain as a reminder that life once bustled here. Take a look at an ancient stone giant, about 2,700 years old. This is an Assyrian Lamassu statue carved from a single piece of stone and weighing about 18 tons. It was recently unearthed in northern Iraq, almost completely intact. Its height and width are approximately 3.8 by 3.9 meters, and on the wings and body, you can still see incredibly fine detailing that has survived millennia. At first, it was noticed on Google Maps, a strange round depression in the middle of the desert. It sparked so much interest that a group went there in person. When they reached the spot, they saw an almost perfectly geometrical circular opening going deep into the ground. What it is and what it was used for is still a mystery. Now imagine this. You're looking at a map and you see a giant triangle in the desert. This enormous shape in Whitman, Arizona, is in fact an abandoned airfield from the time of the Second World War called Luke Auxiliary 4. Each side of the triangle is a runway on which, more than 70 years ago, cadets practiced landing. Here, Russian investigators uncovered the stash of a major criminal group. Inside, they found 36 kilograms of explosives, about 100 units of weapons, including grenade launchers and automatic rifles, and roughly 15,000 rounds of ammunition. It is not just a stash, but a full-fledged underground arsenal. In January of the year 2018, a family from Idaho Falls woke up to a loud crash. It turned out that the floor in their garage had collapsed downward, revealing a hidden room 3.6 meters deep, filled with strange objects. This secret room is not listed in any city documents, and inside they found children's toys, old bottles, and items from the 1950s. A team of archaeologists spent hours digging through an old, early 20th century railway dump. Forcing their way through heavy, iron-rich soil, they found rare poison bottles, old medicine vials, vintage soda bottles, and ceramic jugs. Rising from the water near Kronstadt, researchers came across the fort Emperor Alexander I. It was built in the 1840s as a large coastal fortress with graceful cast-iron staircases and complex engineering. But after the fort was decommissioned in the year 1896, it was converted into the world's first laboratory for studying plague. Scientists risked their lives here, working with deadly pathogens until the year 1918. A real jackpot. Treasure hunters dug up a chest in which there were real gold bars of enormous value. Someone's carefully hidden riches had simply been waiting underground for their moment. Over more than 30 years, the so-called Clown Museum discovered about 200 unrestored vintage cars. Among them is one of the largest collections of Ford Model T vehicles gathered in one place. Competing with these people in the search for rare cars is essentially pointless. In an abandoned mansion that once belonged to a drug cartel, treasure hunters with metal detectors found two huge safes buried in the yard. To pull these monsters out, they had to bring in heavy machinery. Inside was a real criminal treasury, an arsenal of weapons, rare antique guns, whole stacks of sheets with passwords and codes, as well as gold coins and heavy gold bars. In addition, wet bundles of cash, swollen from water, very clearly showed how much dirty money had once been hidden in this place. During the exploration of an abandoned house with a metal detector, these guys broke through the floor and ran into a huge hidden stash that had been concealed there for many years. Under a rotten board, a whole treasure revealed itself. An urn filled with old coins and bundles of banknotes, hidden in such a way that their owner clearly intended to come back, but never did. History starts to come alive when the metal detector goes off and you really catch gold. Just like this lucky person who dug up a centuries-old artifact. Inside it, there was a rare German silver medal issued in honor of Kaiser Wilhelm II's speech in the Reichstag in the year 1914. Right in the middle of a boundless desert stands an abandoned United States Navy airplane from the 1950s, very far from any airfield. How it ended up in such a remote place is a mystery even to those who found it. An ordinary day with a metal detector can easily turn into a job for investigators. That is exactly what happened when a heavy locked safe was pulled out of muddy sludge. When they cracked it open, inside they found a loaded pistol and a bundle of banknotes soaked with water. It very much looks like the safe was simply thrown into the water to cover up the traces of some long ago crime. Researchers found one of the last surviving paddle tugs in the world, the PS John H. Amos. It is a 33.5-meter-long vessel weighing 202 tons, built in Scotland in the year 1931. It still has its wooden paddle blades, coal-fired furnace, and control systems in the wheelhouse. All of this has survived almost a full century and is miraculously still intact. When severe drought exposed the bottom of the Lady Bower Reservoir, the water level dropped to record lows. And then, an incredible secret emerged from beneath the surface: the submerged ruins of two whole villages that had gone under the water back in the 1940s during the construction of the reservoir. Researchers discovered well-preserved structures, old railway supports, pumping stations, bridge beams, and installations from the time of the Second World War, scattered across the newly exposed bottom. Ancient legends spoke of the treasures of a wealthy tribe. But no one expected the story to turn out to be this literal. With the help of a metal detector, a treasure hunter found a brick wall behind which there was a hidden underground room packed with artifacts. Inside were urns in the shape of animals, engraved vessels, and a huge stone chest full of jewelry made from various precious metals. But the main thing was the pots filled to the brim with old coins. Get ready to meet a giant, next to which a Tyrannosaurus looks almost like a household pet. A farmer in Argentina discovered the remains of a colossus that is officially considered the largest animal ever to walk on land. This prehistoric giant reached roughly 40 meters in length and rose up to about 20 meters in height. That is like a 7-story building. It weighed around 77 tons, roughly the same as 14 adult African elephants piled into one gigantic hill. You know what? It is hard even to imagine how it managed to move at all. In the state of Rhode Island, there is a ruined mausoleum that can rightfully be called one of the creepiest abandoned locations. Human remains and dentures are still lying scattered on the floor. Despite news reports and the indignation of local residents, nobody has really taken on the task of securing this desecrated burial site, where many coffins are still lying open. The list of names of people who still rest here looks like an actual list of ghosts. In a remote part of the Australian outback, locals discovered a huge charred fragment of space debris. It turned out to be part of a Chinese rocket that had survived re-entry into the atmosphere. The 3-meter-long fragment was still smoldering when it was found. It had fallen after separating from a satellite. You could say that the space race literally fell into someone's backyard. I am Venom. In one of the caves in Krabi, Thailand, tourists discovered a huge skeleton that looked as if a giant creature were fighting a horned serpent. The video instantly spread across the internet, but the truth turned out to be much calmer. It is a large-scale art installation created based on local legends and folklore. Decades later, the legendary T-34 tank was finally lifted out of its watery grave, one of the most impressive recovery operations ever caught on video. The 30-ton machine, lost during the battles of the Second World War around the year 1944, was miraculously preserved thanks to the cold water and silty bottom. And most astonishing of all, after cleaning and repairs, experts suggest that the tank's diesel engine could theoretically be started again, even after almost 80 years. How would you react if you saw a giant metal starfish in the water? Such a mysterious 8-armed circular structure was found off the coast of Rhode Island and baffled both locals and specialists. It has steel legs and a concrete top. According to experts, it is part of an old oceanographic monitoring system. Researchers discovered petroglyphs carved directly into a vertical stone wall. These drawings are an attempt by people of an ancient civilization to tell about their life, events, and faith. The engravings have survived more than 2,000 years, enduring rain, wind, and sun, and they are still clearly visible. Imagine you're driving past a forest, and suddenly you see a ship. A 15-meter-long vessel stands mysteriously abandoned right in the forest, almost by the roadside. It looks so out of place that it seems as if it was simply teleported there from some harbor. Under mountains in China, researchers descended into a huge cave system with incredible natural formations. Enormous chambers where giant stalactites hang from ceilings more than 100 meters high, and powerful stalagmites rise up from the floor. This underground world, carved by water over millions of years, looks like another extraterrestrial realm. In Lithuania, there is an abandoned park that can be called a Soviet twin of Pripyat. Here, there is still a rare Jetstar 2 ride from the year 1969, one of only 3 that still exist in the world. Once it accelerated up to 72 kilometers per hour. And what is especially surprising is that despite decades of neglect, some of the old mechanical rides are still in working condition. Deep in the rainy mountains of Vancouver Island hides the forgotten gold rush town of Leechtown. Once it was a lively settlement, but now there are only rusty mechanisms from the 1920s and the overgrown ruins of the Kapoor Lumber Company sawmill. The history of this place is literally being overgrown with moss and trees. The next treasure hunters literally stumbled upon gold. When they started digging into the ground, gilded bricks poured out from beneath it. It looked as if someone had once hidden wealth directly in the foundation. While digging through hard, rocky soil, treasure hunters found ancient clay vessels that had lain underground for centuries. When they carefully opened the cracked jugs, thousands of old coins and precious ornaments spilled out. This incredible treasure, hidden in several caches, is a hugely important historical hoard that someone deliberately concealed many centuries ago. Believe it or not, an old bus that once carried the team for which Cristiano Ronaldo played was found rotting away in a forest 30 years later. The 12-meter-long bus still keeps traces of its football past inside, items and little things related to the game that lay there for decades. In August of the year 2020, at a gold mining site near Fairbanks, Alaska, after a flood, a woolly mammoth skeleton was fully exposed. This Ice Age giant was almost complete. Huge tusks so heavy that it took 4 people to lift them, jaws with intact molars, leg bones. Everything was lying right there in the gold field. Imagine the level of surprise for people who were digging for gold, but instead found an Ice Age colossus. One explorer came across an item that at first seemed to him to be an antique weapon, but on closer inspection, it turned out to be a steam drill hammer from the beginning of the 20th century, a device for drilling rock that had lain for more than 100 years and still preserved its shape. In Lake Michigan, a mysterious funnel about 9 meters across was discovered. It goes approximately 6 meters deeper than the surrounding lake bottom and still raises questions among researchers. What created it? A natural process or human interference? Step back 166 million years in an English limestone quarry. Workers found more than 200 footprints left by huge dinosaurs, megalosaurs. These tracks stretch for about 150 meters and show the exact route along which these giants once walked across an ancient muddy bottom. It is now the largest and most important dinosaur track site ever found in the United Kingdom. One brave explorer found a military airfield in the desert and discovered there an abandoned strategic bomber, B-58A. This Cold War machine once served as a flying test bed for guided missiles. Now it stands forgotten, with giant landing gear struts and complex turbine innards open to all the winds. This Victorian-era pub looks as if someone hit pause on it 15 years ago. Inside, explorers found real treasures: hats from the 1870s, vintage motorcycles, original paintings slowly rotting in the gloomy corridors. In the basement, everything is untouched as well. Unique brewing equipment and dusty jukeboxes from another era. And what do you think about this find? A subscriber sent us this photograph without a single caption. Here we clearly see an object not of earthly origin or secret technology, or perhaps some unknown art installation. What do you think about it? Write in the comments. These guys stumbled upon a mansion that had been abandoned back in the year 1997. In the storage rooms, there are still food products with dates from 1995, family photographs hang on the walls, Christmas decorations stand around, and personal belongings are untouched, as if the owners simply disappeared in one night without taking absolutely anything with them. After climbing a rocky ridge, adventurers saw what at first they took to be their own Area 51, but it turned out to be an abandoned industrial site hidden behind the mountaintop, with several warehouses, dangerous shafts from which sulfurous gases were escaping, and boxes filled with detonators. The secret location of the facility and the modern equipment simply left behind in such a remote place only intensified the question: what exactly was actually happening here? Near one Greek island, there is a chaotic dump of ships, huge rotting vessels piled together and forgotten. Among the rust and debris, researchers noticed strange structures that looked like cement carriers crossed with skunks, bizarre and slightly frightening iron monsters. Divers came across a strange underwater composition: a mannequin, a boat, and an airplane, all in one place. One can only hope that this was deliberately created as an artificial reef or art object, because no other logical reason for such a scene readily suggests itself. The researchers literally had to race against the demolition crew. They returned to a half-collapsed old bank, this time armed not with a crowbar, but with an electric saw. The previous crowbar simply broke during an earlier attempt to break in. When they finally managed to cut their way to the forgotten safe deposit boxes, what they found inside completely knocked the ground out from under their feet. Real silver bars, stamped Fine Silver 99, envelopes stuffed with $100 bills, and an entire sack of old coins. Among them, Mercury dimes from the year 1941 and Buffalo nickels. Most of the boxes were empty, but the few that still contained treasure made this treasure hunt absolutely worthwhile. Now imagine this. You're walking through the British countryside, and suddenly you come across a legendary Soviet attack helicopter. Sounds like a dream, right? But it is not. Right in the middle of the English rural landscape stood a giant Mi-24 Hind, one of the most fearsome combat helicopters of the Cold War. It was found on the RAF Spade-Atom base, which in the 1950s and 1960s was used for testing British missiles. The machine is so huge that its exhaust nozzles are as big as slides in a shopping mall, and yet the cockpit inside is unexpectedly cramped and tight. In the presidential palace in Madagascar, they recently showed the public a gigantic emerald weighing about 300 kilograms. The stone is so enormous that experts are still assessing its real value, bringing in specialists from all over the world. At one unique excavation site, scientists discovered an almost complete dinosaur skeleton about 180 million years old. The bones were so massive that a heavy crane and a team of 20 researchers were needed to lift them. In the wilds of Sakhalin, researchers came across an abandoned Soviet aviation training range. On a 2.5-kilometer runway, there are still 2 MiG-23 fighter aircraft, and nearby hides an underground communications bunker. All of this was left here after the Fighter Aviation Regiment was disbanded in the year 1994. In a half-ruined, abandoned mansion, explorers came across an incredible collection of luxury and classic cars that their mysterious owner had simply left behind and vanished. In front of them lay a genuine automotive graveyard garden, decaying Pontiacs, Camaros, Mustangs, and even a Ferrari F355, slowly falling apart under layers of dust and rust. Imagine you step aboard an abandoned ship, and there is a casino frozen in time. This 50-meter-long ship once took hundreds of players into international waters so they could legally place bets. Now it is waiting to be sent for scrap, and the chips are still lying scattered across the dusty tables. The slot machines stand as dead boxes with dark screens. The roulette wheels are frozen and waiting for players who will never return. The huge gaming hall, more than 550 square meters in area, has turned into a ghostly capsule of this ship's 3 minutes of fame. Now, meet the T-Rex of the ocean. This colossal 2-meter-long skull belonged to a pliosaur, one of the most fearsome marine predators in the history of the planet. It was found embedded in a cliff in Dorset, roughly 15 meters above ground. The teeth are sharp as knife blades, perfectly adapted to tear prey to pieces 150 million years ago. It is one of the most complete and best preserved pliosaur specimens ever found by paleontologists. Deep in the forest, tourists found a crashed helicopter gradually being eaten by nature. The rotor blades are frozen as if time had stopped, and trees are already growing through the cockpit. The origin of this machine remains a mystery. No plates, no official history, only silent metal and the trees growing around it. Take a look at a real mechanical monster hidden in the darkness of an abandoned mine. Researchers found a huge 2-stage compressor and 9-ton electric locomotives still standing on the rails. In addition, the mine has its own welding workshops and a complex power supply system, a rare example of a completely autonomous underground complex. Near the Hope Isles, they found the remains of a 36.5-meter-long vessel with an incredible story. An American once deliberately ran the ship aground about 30 years ago and survived, living on it for almost 28 years, until he finally abandoned his rusting vessel, which by then had turned into a bird sanctuary made of scrap metal. Daredevils using a high-tech drone found the crash site of a Second World War bomber, a B-24 Liberator, hidden deep in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. This huge aircraft with a wingspan of 33.5 meters still lies where it fell, surrounded by impenetrable greenery. Off the coast of Grenada, at a depth of about 5 meters, they found 26 life-size figures arranged in a circle. Here, you can see compositions such as Christ of the Deep, a mermaid, petroglyphs, guardians, and even a man on a bicycle. All of this is part of an underwater sculpture park that has become a home for marine life. A real danger for the heart, but in a good way. One prospector's metal detector practically went crazy when it detected a huge gold nugget lying just a few centimeters below the surface in Alaska. The find is worth a fortune and is a vivid reminder that an enormous amount of treasure is still hiding beneath our feet. In the High Sierra Mountains, researchers found a forgotten gold mine, an abandoned settlement hidden from the world for 80 years. On the site, there are still massive engines and rusting equipment for transporting logs. The entire complex looks as if the workers simply left one evening and never came back. On the remote shore of Itup Island, a storm threw up a ship that ended up staying there forever. Now, more than 15 meters of rusted steel structure stand on black volcanic sand, turning this corner of the planet into a surreal postcard. In a remote desert, they found a unique time capsule of mid-20th century America. It is a gigantic collection of perfectly preserved vintage cars, buses, campers, and even military aircraft. There is everything here. From 1970s, buses converted into little homes and small teardrop trailers to classic wartime trucks. The dry desert climate has literally preserved all these vehicles in the past. Imagine you're pushing through thick jungle and suddenly emerge into the presence of a gigantic ghost from the past. In front of you is the crash site of the legendary Japanese Second World War, aircraft G4M1, Betty 2656. It still lies where it fell, on Boana Island, with a wingspan of about 25 meters. There is a place where time stopped in the era of steam traction. In an abandoned railway depot, old steam locomotives from the nitrate boom of the early 1900s are still standing. Now these giants of the past slowly rust alone, turning into steel monuments to a long-gone age. Another ghost car from the past is a Buick from the year 1914. It stood untouched for 85 years, and its original mileage was only 1,776 miles. And when it was finally found and restored, a miracle happened. The century-old engine roared again, and the car got a new owner and a second life. Welcome to a real automotive paradise. Here, in one place, stand more than 500 classic cars. Row after row of vehicles from different decades, from different countries and eras. For a car enthusiast, this is not just a junkyard. It is a treasure trove that you can only dream of. Who says searching with a metal detector is boring? Ask the guys whose device caught a live phosphorus incendiary bomb from the Luftwaffe that had been lying in a field in Essex since the time of the Second World War. Divers hunting for treasure on the seabed of the Caribbean Sea found what every treasure hunter dreams of: a real treasure chest. It was lying on the seafloor, and inside were ancient coins and a Buddhist statuette. It is practically the perfect picture from a child's fantasy about pirate treasure. At an altitude of 2,500 meters in the remote mountains of Idaho, an explorer found the abandoned mining complexes of Skylark and Ramshorn from the late 19th century. These buildings, constructed directly into the rock walls, once served as home for miners who extracted lead and silver. And it is amazing that the barracks, cable car supports, and other structures are still standing almost exactly as the workers left them more than 100 years ago. Solving an old case, literally. When divers descended into the murky water near the city of Murfreesboro, they discovered a car that had been stolen from a dealership 2 years earlier. Using powerful magnets and special floats, the team managed to pull the car off the river bottom, where it had once been dumped to hide the evidence. One explorer stumbled upon a military fire truck hidden at a secret government facility in the state of Connecticut. Its original red paint is still visible, and it still has its original rescue and emergency equipment installed. The vehicle looks as if it is waiting for its next call, even though it was abandoned many years ago. Deep in the forest stands a house with huge letters reading, "Do not enter," on the roof. And that warning is not for nothing. In the attic, explorers found a disturbing eyeless doll that radiated a sense of real obsession. The atmosphere was so unsettling that the explorers simply turned around and left immediately, not wanting to go any further. There is clearly something wrong with this place. In front of us is a huge graveyard of military equipment, where weapons were simply left to rot. Everywhere, there are 66mm rocket launchers, heavy anti-aircraft guns, and heaps of metal. Especially eerie was a bucket claw from an excavator, almost identical to those used in Chernobyl, lying next to gas masks and possibly dangerous material samples. The next lucky finder was a young woman who, with the help of an ordinary metal detector, discovered precious stones and something even more valuable. Among the finds were real gold nuggets that had been lying in the ground for years, waiting for someone to finally discover them. Imagine you enter an old English cottage, where, it seems, no one has set foot for many years. In the half-ruined rooms, under a layer of dust and cobwebs, stand antique furniture and bronze statues. But the creepiest thing is the collection of stuffed birds, such as owls, which seem to go on watching everyone who comes inside. When the water level in Lake Mead dropped, a 6-meter-long boat damaged by fire emerged on the surface. Despite the damage, it still retains old marine equipment, distributors, spark plugs, and other parts that have amazingly survived decades underwater. After 17 years of complete oblivion under bushes and trees, a Mack truck from the year 1976 was discovered. The vehicle was completely overgrown and looked like a long-dead chunk of metal. But thanks to the efforts of the enthusiasts who found it, the truck was brought back to life. And suddenly its engine, which seemed to have fallen silent forever, started again and began to run. From a distance, it looked like a real UFO. But when the explorers came closer, the truth turned out to be even more interesting. In front of them stood an incredible building specifically designed to look like an alien spacecraft. Sometimes even a school experiment can outlive half a century. Two brothers found in Bahamian waters a Pepsi bottle with a note inside, written almost 50 years earlier by a 14-year-old schoolboy. The glass bottle had traveled about 1,600 kilometers across the Atlantic before ending up in their hands. Thanks to the note, they were able to track down the author of the message, who by now had become a grandfather. One metal detector enthusiast made a chilling but incredible discovery. During a dig, he came across an ancient human skeleton lying deep underground. Around the remains was an actual little treasure chest, dozens of old coins, elegant gold necklaces, and fine chains. Everything suggests that this person was buried together with their most valuable possessions many centuries ago. This vehicle from the time of the Second World War can safely be called one of the most unusual. In front of the explorers was a strange hybrid that seemed to combine the features of a tractor and an amphibious vehicle. The machine looks as if it was built according to the principle, whatever we had, we welded on. And that is exactly what makes it so memorable. The attentive eye of a tourist noticed in the mud a perfectly preserved flint or bone arrowhead neatly sticking out of the ground. This hunter's weapon is approximately several thousand years old. Its length is about 5 centimeters, and once such arrowheads were a real, high-tech survival tool. While exploring a rocky cliff, a group found ancient coins literally embedded into the rock. This accidental, natural safe had preserved the currency for centuries, thanks to geological processes. The coins seem to be glued to the stone forever and have survived everything: rain, winds, and time. Not far from Helsinki, researchers found concrete bunkers left over from the Porkala naval base of the year 1944. This huge network from the time of the Cold War once could hold up to 50,000 people. Now the former fortifications simply crumble quietly, reminding us of the former tension between superpowers. Get ready to be amazed by giant teeth found on a riverbank. These massive molars belong to a woolly mammoth that roamed this area more than 10,000 years ago. Each tooth weighs about 27.5 kilograms and is covered with characteristic ridges needed to chew tough prehistoric vegetation. I am not fat, it is just my skin. Fluffy. The joking phrase fits perfectly with the scale of the former owner of these teeth. Well then, friends, at this point, our 1-hour episode is coming to an end. If you liked it and you want to see the next part, something similar, then write about it in the comments, put likes, subscribe to the channel, and right now, write in the comments the keyword rocket. That is how I will know that you watched until the very end. Thank you all very much for watching. And next, watch one of the 2 videos that have appeared on your screen.